It was probably the craziest promotion I've ever experienced.
This is David Fowler. He got promoted 11 times from an intern to a distinguished engineer, all at Microsoft, and I asked him about everything he learned along the way.
A lot of things that get you to senior and maybe principal hurt you growing even further.
What are the hidden, unexpected perks of getting promoted to a distinguished engineer?
Okay, the coolest part.
Also, since he's been at Microsoft for over 17 years, I asked him for his unique perspectives about the company. Did you notice anything internally when Satya became CEO?
The culture just changed completely, right?
Before you change roles, ask when the last reorg was. What's the thinking behind that advice? I'm curious what has kept you at Microsoft as long as you've been. Here's the full episode. First thing I wanted to go over is I think Microsoft's leveling system is a little bit unique compared to the other big tech companies. I see on levels.fyi that the leveling system goes from 59 to 70, and there's almost 2 levels per title, 2 levels per SD1, 2 levels per SD2, 2 in senior, and it keeps going on all the way down to distinguished. Can you explain the Microsoft leveling system a little bit?
Yeah, so I can't tell you why it starts at 59. I'm sure someone who's been there longer than me can tell you why it starts at 59. I believe there are levels below that aren't engineering roles, and that's probably why it has that system. So when you join from college, you typically start at 59 or 60, depending on like how many times you intern, how well you did. There's different things that go into it. But entry is 59. So that's like sweet one at other companies. And then you progress in level. In Microsoft, there are things called level bands. So when you say there's like 2 levels per title, the title tends to be the band. So you can say like I am a junior engineer. You could be 59 or 60. So you can't tell from someone's title which notch they're at. So there's 59, 60 is sweet 1, 50, 61, 62 is 2. And then 64 is senior, and then principal is actually 3 levels. I never really sat down and thought about the why is done that way. I'm sure people that are really smart came up with those levels and why they're that way. But the principal level, the band is so broad, the depth of experience of the people in that band is immense. So you could be talking to someone who is like the last level of principal band that's been there forever, or someone who just entered the principal band, like just came from senior. And you wouldn't know from looking at their title. So, and then beyond that is like, no one knows, right? It's like levels partner, that has 3 bands. And then there's beyond partners like technical fellow and systems engineer. Yep. So yeah, it's a broad system. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for laying that out. So yeah, that's the thing I want to dig into is, I mean, you went through this entire thing. You started all the way as an intern, and
Yep.
you've been there for your entire career, and you grew all the way to distinguished. So I kind of want to go over that story. Could you tell me the story behind you joining Microsoft?
Yeah, so I went to college at Florida Tech, and I'm from Barbados. I left Barbados at like 18, like everyone else that goes to college. Went to college. Funny enough, I was looking for colleges that had career fairs, and I chose one that was closest to like Barbados. It's 1 flight home to the Caribbean from Florida, so that was a really convenient place. I got in. Funny enough, my first major was computer engineering because I thought I wanted to do software and hardware. But in the first class, I was like, nope, not for me. I want to code. I have been coding since I was like 10 years old, so that's what I want to do. Changed majors to computer science. Did my first year of programming. Funny enough, I thought people that chose computer science had been doing programming like their whole life and they knew what they wanted to do. But in the first Java class, like no one knew how to code. And I was like, this is kind of crazy. I thought this was like a thing that everyone that chose computer science would do before you come here. And that was kind of like being tossed into the pit of computer science, like learning about algorithms. And then after that, I kind of met one of my best friends. To this day, still, we still like best friends. And we started to make games. And we have been working on like nights and weekends making games for fun at school. And by the time the first career fair came around, there were a bunch of companies that came in to kind of see different students. And we thought to ourselves, how do we differentiate from other students? So we came in with a laptop showing our game demo, and we showed it to all the recruiters. And that first year, we got like I think like 4 offers for internships. I got Microsoft, GE, a bunch of other smaller companies in Florida. And my friend went to EA. So we built a game. He went to EA, interviewed there, got intern there. I went to Microsoft, and that's how I got the internship. I showed them the game. I did interviews on campus, flew out, did full-time interviews. Before COVID, where it was all in person whiteboarding, got my internship, and that was kind of like history. I interned twice, 2006 and 7. It was eye-opening. It's coming from a small country, going to a big company, experiencing like big campus, big technology, talking to people who were like really, really, really smart, absorbing information. It was great. And I was part of the last set of interns that got to go to Bill Gates' house. That was kind of fun.
Oh. What was that like, going to Bill Gates' house?
So historically, every intern group at the end of the summer got to go to Bill Gates' house. That was the main event, right? In my time at least. And you would get picked up in a bus, and they would take all your technology. They would take away your phones, take away all your stuff, give you instructions. You actually park out, I think, at a church, and they would take your stuff so you could take pictures. You get, they would tell you like what you can and can't do at the house. And then all the interns would just go into his like big, really huge mansion. Funny story is, I recall just standing around talking to interns, not paying attention to what was happening. And I remember seeing a rush of interns like run towards me, and I couldn't figure what was going on. I turned around, and he was behind me. I was like, oh, there's Bill Gates. I shook his hand. So you see, I spoke to him once.
When you interviewed for Microsoft at the time in 2006, was there leak code, or what did the process look like at the time? What kind of things did they ask?
There's a book called How Would You Move Mount Fuji? And it's this classic book doing tech interviews. Like Microsoft created these like leak code style puzzles that everyone loved to hate now. Like the puzzles that are like, why is a manhole cover round is one of the most famous ones that people would ask you a question.
Okay.
When I was on campus doing the interview, I'll never forget, they were asking me questions, and I had been prepped for coding interviews. I had been thinking about like coding stuff, but I hadn't taken all the classes yet because I was in my first year of university. So I hadn't done like all the courses required to learn about all the things, right? So it was me on my own, and my friend trying to figure out how to prep for interviews. And they asked me, it's so visceral. They asked me a palindrome question, super easy, not hard. I did it on paper, like with a pencil, like writing on paper. And then they asked me, did you ever watch Die Hard 3?
No.
There's a scene where Bruce Willis and Sam Jackson have to stop a bomb from going off. And there's like water in a fountain. And they have a 5-gallon jug and a 3-gallon jug. And they have to make exactly 4 gallons to avoid the disaster.
Okay.
And I had seen the movie, right? But I couldn't remember the sequence of steps required to get that to work. And in the interview, my after the coding question, they asked this puzzle. Right, so you have infinite water, and you want to make 4 gallons, and you have a 3 and a 5 jug, and you have to make exactly 4 gallons. Like, how do you do it? And I sat there, and I was like, oh my god, this is Die Hard. And I figured it out, but it was funny because to me it was like, this is like pre-leak code, not even thinking about solving some sorting question or something. This was just like puzzles. Like, can you think through puzzles? And the last question was, how do you count the number of gas stations in Florida? And I sat there and I was like, is this a trick question? And the guy looks at me, he says no, and I'm like, what? I don't get the point. I don't get the point of this stuff. And I thought I had like done really poorly, but they called me, so I was like, okay, I couldn't have failed miserably.
That's so funny because people hate on leak code all the time, but these puzzles, it sounds like leak code's better than these puzzles, actually. How is
100%.
this related to the job?
I don't even know if you can prepare for some of these things. Like my last interview, my second last interview, when I was when I flew out and I was on campus, I got asked, how do I add two numbers in base -2? That was my final question. It was just like, what?
It's come a
Yeah.
long way since then.
It's changed a lot. I mean, like, some for the better, some for the worse.
So going back to the story then, so after you had the internships, you committed for full time, and
Yep.
then you had a pretty quick career growth on the outset. And I see that there are a few pivotal projects that led to the upward trajectory past senior. Kind of want to talk about the story behind those projects. So, for instance, maybe we can start with NuGet, which is the package manager. What's the
Yeah.
story behind that project?
That was interesting because NuGet, I think we're like 10 plus years in now as like the package manager for .NET. It was when I think about the impact now compared to what it was when it started, it's kind of jarring. Because we started off, we were building a brand new web stack, and we were trying to compete with like the LAMP stack, right? So LAMP was like Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP, and we were competing with that from a .NET Windows Server standpoint. Whether or not that made sense or not at the time, I didn't think about that stuff. Like the bosses above me told me we're doing that. Like, let's do it. So we built this whole new web stack, and Ruby on Rails had come out like concurrently at the same time, and gems was like this huge deal. Ruby gems, get packages, run commands in Rails. And we had seen that, but there was also a cohort in the company looking at things like WordPress and Drupal, and those have packages too. And I think the consensus was we need to have a package manager to like pull in packages so you can extend the platform. And the very first version of NuGet was this in-browser package manager that was like a WordPress thing. And I remember we had this meeting with who is now an EVP, Scott Guthrie, and it was all about like Rails and gems, and we have to compete with the package manager. And there was a product manager who had mocked up in screenshots and PowerPoint an experience. And it was me working with an architect saying, like, we had built something. Like, can we just start from here? And that meeting formed the NuGet team. It was me. I was the first engineer. There was an architect, David Ebel, and Phil Hack, and we were the founding team of NuGet. There were other open source nascent package managers in the ecosystem, OpenWrap and New, and we like had a conversation with some of those people, and we started off this mission to build a package manager for .NET.
And so when you were building this, it sounds like it got pretty critical adoption within the .NET platform.
Yeah.
What did your performance review look like when you were finished building this thing? Was that like a really incredible success for someone who wasn't even a senior engineer yet?
Yeah, I got my first promotion came like 8 months in when I joined. Even before NuGet, I think like my first year was me. I had interned twice, so I had a lot of experience like with just Microsoft just in general, and I would work on the things I was assigned, and then I'd work on more stuff. One of the things that I did was I would troll forums looking for feedback for our products, and I would just build features to solve them. And I just did that over and over and over, and then kind of showed product managers on the team and architects, and who turns out were my sponsors. I guess in the looking back on how it went, and I think that helped me be in a place where I could be the one to build NuGet. I would basically just look for problems to solve, and I would attempt to code them first. I mean, maybe I'm still the same way. I'm a code first, ask questions later kind of person. So my whole thing is code is currency. I can show you a working sample. It's not PowerPoint. It's not a document. Here's a working example of something. Oh, we should start there and then move on to something else. So my review for NuGet was like I was getting really good reviews early in my career because I would just grab things. Funnily enough, one of my directors at the time told me like maybe 5 years ago that he would just tell people that David has energy. Go talk to him. maybe that's why stuff came my way.
You mentioned that NuGet grew way past what you imagined. And I know at some companies, there's this idea of deferred impact where sometimes people continue to get credit for something that they built and is continuing to pay out for the company. Did you see anything like that in your subsequent performance reviews?
Yeah, I want to say maybe the bigger ones. The bigger ones felt to me like a conglomeration of history, like past success adding up plus success. I think at Microsoft in general, impact is supposed to be for the year. But I think when you're doing these, I think there are some things we call them band changes, right? So when you jump across bands, it's a bigger promotion. Within bands, it's a smaller promotion. So if I go from 61 to 62, I'm still a SD2, but it's still worth a promotion. But when you cross the boundary of going from two to senior or senior principal, you require more things to more impact to make that leap. And I think I'm not sure if there's an official deferred impact thing in Microsoft, but I remember that did come into play when I went to higher levels of principal and stuff, because it was definitely not a one-off, like, oh, you did this one thing this year, like you're promoted. It's like, have you been showing repeated impact over the last N years, and do we want to keep you going forward, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it did matter.
You mentioned some other larger projects, so maybe we can talk about some of those. So there was
Yeah,
a Signal R, or is it Signal
Signal R, yeah. So that
Signal R?
was
Okay.
that came from the naming. The naming is the time frame came from the time of Flickr. Web 2.0 remove ease from the end of things. So that's, I don't know why we called it Signal R. I mean, we know why, but that was a fun project. I had been working on nights and weekends on this project, and it was, funnily enough, like Google Docs came out, and I had been like enthralled with the fact that you could co-edit in a document. And I was like, this is just nuts, and it works super well concurrently. And I was like, can we do this for code? So I went off trying to build Google Docs for code. Could have been rich, but didn't do that anyway. And while doing it, I learned about WebSockets, which actually hadn't come out yet. I learned about basically how to build those kinds of apps, and that led to the creation of Signal R. In the meantime, there was a product manager on the team, Damien Edwards, who was also building a talk to describe how to build long-running streaming apps in .NET. So I had seen his talk, and I was like, hey, I'm building this thing. We should collaborate on this new library, right? So that kind of spawned the like nights and weekends, what we call at Microsoft. You can moonlight and work on things that are not tied to your work separately, officially. So we had been doing that like overnight. We just work on these things up until like midnight every night. We made it open source, and then people started to use it, and we were like, okay, this is interesting. It's catching on, becoming a thing now. It was still just two of us working on this every now and then. Didn't know what we were doing really, kind of like just building this thing to make it work. And then at some point, a product manager at Microsoft on the team said, hey, we should make this official. And that's when I think that was the first time I experienced like building a project from scratch. Previously, I had been working on other people's ideas. Someone had a great idea. I was a decent dev. I would come in and be like founding engineer. This one was like my brainchild. So like, it was very much, we built the prototype, built the entire thing from scratch, and now I was being given the chance to have a team to work on it. I was never a manager, but I was the pseudo tech lead. So we hired like kids from college that ended up working on Signal R. We had a team of like 8, I think, at one point, and it was surreal because it was like, okay, there is this random thing that I built like on a weekend, and then it kind of turning into this project that's real.
What was the motivation for Signal R? What made you pull the weekends and the late nights to build this thing that seems like it was outside of Microsoft?
I hadn't seen anything like it. Okay, like when Google Docs came out, it was first of its kind to work that well, and it just felt super new, and I hadn't seen apps do that. And it was like, how do we enable more apps to do the same kind of thing? Node.js, like Socket.io and Node were super new, and Socket.io had just come out, and it was like, oh, that's a really cool way of building these apps that are chat and can send stuff from server to client. And I think that just drove me because it was like, okay, I hadn't seen people attempt to do this before. Let's push. It's funny, we pushed the boundaries of like the technology a bit. We hit limits like all over the place in the tech stack that became problems to solve deep in the core platform too. So that was a really good um, way to learn more about the overall networking stack. And I think the amount of problems we got to tackle maybe made it enthralling for like a dev that like I got nurse sniped. It was like catnip. I was like, oh my god.
That this is so interesting because you grew through this project and it was permissionless, which is that no one handed it to you. There wasn't some manager or some PM that came to you and said, "Hey, your staff's on this project." You just went and you built something, and it was so impactful that it actually led to a ton of career growth. Um, I'm kind of curious. Maybe we can. Is there some way for us to reverse engineer that for others? Like how do you go about starting projects where the motivation comes completely from you within a large company?
So really good question. Um, if I had to boil it down to one sentence, you can just do things. And I think the way people talk about it now is you have agency, and it often seems like you don't. Like it's really hard to find time. And I am not recommending people spend nights and weekends working on all the projects, but early in my career, I my main goal was to get better at like software engineering. And the way of doing that was to learn everything. Like build anything you can build, games, websites, like just build a ton of different things, and you just gain experience from learning how to build those types of software, right? Um, so I think that was ingrained in me from really early on. And then the other thing I did early on in my career was I found someone on the team that I wanted their career. So on my team, there was an architect, David Evo, and his job seemed really cool. He got to think about the future. He kind of spanned multiple areas of the product. He got to build the next wave of what was coming next. Um, so I basically attached myself to him and I mimicked his behaviors. And I said to myself, okay, I want that role. Let me make sure I'm seeing what he does that seems to work, and I want to keep doing that. And I would be the coder of his ideas, right, for a while, and that turned into learning how to do it on my own. So I did this gradual thing where I was like attach myself to people who were like that, and then I found myself in that same position. Okay, here's a new thing. I have some insights. Let me try spiking a thing that will work, and then I communicate ideas with code. So I would always build a prototype first and then show an advocate on the team, show the architect, show the PM, and say, like, is this useful? Is it cool? I saw this issue that a customer was having. I think this solves the problem. Do you think we can turn it into something? And that I think that pattern of doing that helped me gain insights into what helps people get over the hump of like, should we build something or not? I would build 1,000 things and maybe one would hit.
It's interesting that you say agency. I think a lot of people who work at big companies or talk about big companies, they feel like it's difficult to have agency. They have all these projects that are assigned to them depending on the team culture. And it sounds like you had that agency through energy. So you were moonlighting, you were doing going above and beyond. You did your normal stuff, but then on top of that, you had all this extra agency. Am I understanding that's how you unlocked agency at a big company?
And I think it afforded me I think once you build a reputation for being able to kind of perform, build things, I think more things come your way. I don't want to say like it is easy or it will happen, but I think in my case, 100%, like the more things I built, the more things I showed people on the team, people would just say things like, "Hey, David, we're building this new thing. Like, we want to get your take. We want to get your opinion. Should we work on it? Can you help us build this thing?" Um, a lot of opportunity comes your way when I think you have a good rep for building stuff. I think further in my career, that showed very true for what happened after Signaler, pretty much.
You get a lot more of those permissioned opportunities when you have credibility, and permissionless agency is, it's almost this hack to kinda bypass credibility.
Yeah. And the funny story, I think the funny thing is like you get a chance to be more permissionless the better your track record is. So the more success you have, the more leeway you get to fail, which gives you space to try more things. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I've seen that a lot. The very high, fast-growing software engineers, they're almost this weapon that management and people around them say, "We trust you. Go do that thing that you do," and they can go and try all these risky projects. I bet if you were someone who was struggling to meet expectations, a lot more directed opportunities are being handed to you, and you're being monitored. So I could totally,
100%. Yeah.
totally
That's
see
this
that.
so true.
Going to your late stage promos, you got the promotion to principal, you got the promotion to distinguished at Microsoft. I'm curious, what is the thing that led to the promotion to principal?
Principal was interesting. So I had one boss, I won't say his name. I had a one boss who told me when I got to senior that my promos would slow down. And I remember that meeting where I sat down and I got the promotion. I was really happy, and then he kind of gave me this downer, like, don't expect more promotions like from here, because I was like, what does that mean? Um, and I really took it to heart. But the jump to principal is a big jump. I had been working on Signal R at the time. I built this. If you ever use Heroku, Heroku like pioneered Git pushing and deploying your app like instantly, right? We had built there was a tech called App Harbor for .NET. This company was doing the same thing for .NET, and we built a similar thing for Azure. This is like super early in Azure timeframe, right? Like we had built this like brand new. It's actually still there. It's called Kudu. Um, and I had been working with this same architect, and I had built it with him. Um, and then at some point in that time frame, I got pulled off of that, and I think this is one of the places where like your track record helps you get set up for the future opportunities. So I had my director tell me, "Hey, we have this new thing spinning up, and we need you to go work on it." And obviously, you're working on something else. You're like, "Man, I want to finish what I'm working on," but then this thing happens. You're like, "Okay, I'll help you with this thing." And that ended up being the beginning of the new .NET, .NET Core, the rewrite. It was cross-platform and modern and new, and it was a big opportunity. Like so big, it was scary at first. Like, oh my gosh, like what do you mean you're the architect? Like, and I was senior. It was me and another principal engineer that got chosen to be the architects of this project. And I hadn't had an experience working at that scale before, because I think we had like 30 engineers that were working on this project. We had free reign to kind of build whatever we thought was right, and that was like both amazing and terrifying. Um, and I think through that project, I learned a ton of things, like knowing how to. I don't want to say we weren't managers, but learning how to manage a project and architecture and scale. And like initially, I was trying to code review every single change. You can imagine that burnt me out. Within a year, it was like, okay, we can't do this anymore. We have to figure out how to trust people and scale and figure out what's important, what's not urgent versus urgent, etc. Um, that year, I got promoted. Actually, I had my first kid, and I got promoted that to principal that same year. I did this the first year of .NET Core design and building it.
You mentioned that the team grew so much that you had to scale yourself out of necessity. What are the things that you did that allowed you to be an architect for so many engineers without
Yeah.
burning yourself out?
So I learned some of this during Signar. The smaller version was Signar only had like 7 or 8 people overall, right? Engineers, testers, product managers, and we had 2 new hires. And I had never had the experience of delegating in a way where I thought it was like, if I gave you this work, it's to grow you, right? I never thought that way before. I was always like, I'm a senior engineer. I can get this done. I can do it faster than you. Like, why would I give you this thing when I can do it faster? Um, we had really smart engineers that we hired from college, and it took me a while to kind of get past. It's going to take them longer at first, but once they understand all the stuff, then we can amplify the impact. And I think once I saw that, it flipped my brain. So I had something from the signal timeframe that was like, okay, if you can invest in people and kind of get them on the same page as you, if you are on the same wavelength, if you can delegate more, um, then you can kind of get more done as a team, right? You begin to think about outcomes and less about like the work you're doing individually. I think the leap from senior to principal feels like being able to do more through others than yourself. And it's where I think a lot of people end up plateauing because software engineers are very like, we like coding. We want to be alone. We want to build the things ourselves. Software engineering is a collaborative event. It's like we want to figure out how to get the customer feedback, figure out what to build, figure out how to build it the best way. And I think that change in my brain prepared me for like .NET Core because it was such bigger scale. Like, how do you even begin to manage that many people, that many facets? We rebuilt everything from scratch. Like we literally rebuilt the package manager, the runtime, the libraries, like everything from the get-go. And it was overwhelming at first. What I think helped a lot was not treating everything as equally urgent. Like that was a big deal. Like if this change over here went in and it wasn't perfect, I would be like, we can't merge this. It needs to have this interface, these tests. Learning how to set foundations for others and to trust others and like letting people fail was a really hard thing for me at first. It was like, okay, I could avoid the failure. And it turns out that the team, like, I think a lot of the things that get you to senior and maybe principal hurt you growing even further, right? Being a control freak, being someone who like is amazing at their job, getting stuff done in a very specific way, doesn't really help you when you want to scale it to 1,000 engineers. You have to kind of figure out how to inspire others to do the same as you through different means, like one-on-ones or you being an example or like more different techniques. But it's difficult to just be to type. You aren't going to type harder and make a bigger impact. So it's like I shifted my brain to be outcome focused. It was a big change.
You mentioned the architect title, or I guess role. What does that mean at Microsoft?
That's a fun one. When I joined, I saw someone who was a principal software architect, and I said to myself, "That's the role that I want." I don't know what it is. That's what I want, bro. It's kind of a semi-official role at Microsoft, and like at certain levels, the middle principal band, you can be one of these architects. And to me, it really means you're more breadth rather than depth. You're more overseeing the design of the overall system. We have different engineering archetypes, I would say, even at the highest level. You have someone who's a super coder who is like, I am just gonna build so much stuff. I can impact so many things. There are people who work on really deep technical details that have a huge impact. We have um, one of the foremost GC experts like in the entire world, right? Working on the .NET garbage collector. So you can have that kind of impact. You could be someone overseeing a hugely impactful area of the product. So there's a lot of space to kind of like figure out what archetype you want to be. And I think the architect role for me felt like breadth. So I am architect for ASP.NET Core back in those days, and I am like overseeing the design of the whole stack, the web framework, web server, how we ship package, like the entire engineering idea. And I'm not the engineering lead. I'm the architect, so I'm trying to vet the decisions that are gonna like last for like 20 years. If we do this change now, we can't do this thing in like 5 or 10 years. And I hadn't had experience doing that before, but I had a really good mentors who had done that. So I had been watching and shadowing and trying to understand through experience, like how do you build systems that last 20 years? Like, holy crap, right?
So, as you've grown to distinguished engineer at Microsoft, how has the percent of your time that you spend writing code changed?
It's funny. I think there is what your job is. Like, do I have to code every day to do my job? I don't know if I get rewards anymore for coding. I get rewards for outcomes. But for myself, selfishly, I code every day. So my team knows right now that I send lots of pull requests every day to the code base I'm currently working on. I actually have a new project I'm working on this short, Aspire, and I code a lot. So I personally make sure that when I'm working on a project, I am somewhat involved coding still. I don't want to be the architect who doesn't know the code and is giving people instructions like, you should do this, and I'm going to go away now and disappear somewhere else, and you won't see me again. I want to be the person who is like, you. I'm a pair on the team. I want to be everyone's pairs, and I want to be fixing the builds and doing fixing the tests, and not there isn't any work that's beneath me. It's kind of what I'm thinking. Um, so when I'm on team, I typically work as an engineer on the team.
If you stopped coding right now and you just kept leading the team, would your performance review look fine?
Yeah, I think so. Like, distinguished engineer is definitely about company-wide organizational-wide impact or company-wide impact, like, so I think even though my day job is definitely making sure the architecture of .NET as a whole is sound and good and moving forward, and we're doing the right things and pushing, there's a part of my job that is, like, looking forward and, you know, talking publicly and, like, um inspiring people internally and mentoring people. And so there's a lot of things I do that aren't like what I used to do way before that I think help with impact. Um, as an example, I gave 4 talks internally about how to use AI to do software engineering. And that happened just because I had been using it myself for a lot of different things. And someone said, hey, you should give a talk to the team. You think about the impact of those things, they help when you see engineers who aren't just your boss telling you to go do something seemingly for bad reasons. Engineers who are credible telling you how they do their jobs. So I do a lot of that stuff too. A lot of things are not software engineering to be frank.
When you got the promotion to distinguished engineer, what's the story behind that?
Absolutely insane. First of all, distinguished engineer is the final level of like partner. If you go onto the levels FYI, you'll see level 59 to 80. I think the last is 80, the final level. Distinguished engineer, I think is 70 on there.
Right.
And there's actually an official process to become to get that title. You don't just it's not a promotion that you just get and because you did a great job that year. It is a set of technical leaders have to peer review and decide if you are if they're worthy or not. Decide if you're worthy or not of that title. Like, it was probably the craziest promotion I've ever experienced, mostly because of the people that are there at Microsoft. Just as an example, Guido van Rossum, who created Python, is the same level as me. So
Wow.
like imposter syndrome, right? Imposter. And Guido's great. Like he's great. He's really fun, cool guy. Maximum imposter syndrome. I'm young. I think I'm young for that role too. So like when I was going for that role, I felt as though that would affect me as well. It didn't, but I felt it would affect me. So I had all these hold ups about like, am I really at this level? Can I perform there? Can I do well there? And then would all of my I think this is probably where all the work I've done in the past helped because you do need a body of work and you do need a good track record to qualify for these kinds of roles. You can't just become a DE because you had a one fun year. Um, I think some of the criteria ends up being like, what have you contributed? Like that impacts company wide like things. What have you contributed that has so it is a lot of it is like deferred impact. I guess if it makes sense because um, .NET. Remember when I went to from principal to partner in the email it had .NET Core's impact, and that was a by then it had been about 7 years. It wasn't like I did it last year or the year before. It was like this is built up impact, and then like I had been the architect to help people adopt the new .NET internally, and I had done that for a bunch of different teams. So like there was all this kind of build up to like, I guess, deferred impact. That's a really good way of saying it. Um, and I think all those things helped. NuGet, Signaler, like how did the thing that you helped build and mold and raise like grow? How did it impact the industry, the company? And those all come into account when the I think they're fellows who decide who becomes a DE.
Were you involved in that process at all, or was it a surprise when you got the distinguished promo?
I was involved from the point of view of helping my leadership with like content. So I gave them all of my contributions to things I've written, like papers I've written, code contributions to various projects. I kind of gave them the raw material. I didn't do anything else. um, but what made it impactful for me was seeing the other fellows like acknowledge and say like well deserved and this is about time and like it's like oh, okay, let's go. Maybe I should be here. This is good.
You mentioned the lofty expectations of this distinguished engineer level. Yeah, is that something that you worry about now that you've been acting in the role for a while?
At first, I would tell people I am a baby D. I've only been here like a couple of months or it's been 1 year now and I not sure yet. Um, I think now it's been two and a half, 3 years now. I feel pretty confident I can perform at this level, and I think I understand what is required. Um, I would say initially, very much yes. My first review cycle, um, I felt pressure to like document everything and just write down what I thought was all the impacts. Right? It wasn't. It felt very much like, oh my gosh, I need to make sure I'm writing all stuff down, telling my boss what I'm doing, like making sure he knows, and because I think you're almost an executive at the company, like you're at the level below being an executive, and like it's super scary to think about having to have that impact every year, repeatedly over and over. So I think I found a pattern for kind of like making sure I had the right level of impact. Talking to my bosses, making sure I was visible, making sure I'm doing all the right things. So yeah, I don't feel the pressure as much now. But who knows? I mean, things could change. Things could change.
So, so you went through, it looks like 11 promotions, which is kind of ridiculous. You went
Hopefully,
all the
well,
way from the beginning, all the way to then. And the crazy thing, you're saying Guido, the founder or the creator of Python,
creator of Python.
is that level as well. I can't even fathom because apparently there's one last one, the technical fellow. What does that final boss level even look like?
So the people who are fellows, tech fellows, I guess the one that in my division that everyone idolizes, Anders Helsberg, made 𝗘𝗶𝗀𝗀𝗀, Delphi, C# and TypeScript.
Mm.
So like no one's competing with that dude because like no one you can't repeat building four successful languages. Um, but I think if you were thinking about the archetype of like someone who is a fellow, it's that level of impact, right? Or the people who built the Windows kernel. Actually, there's one guy, Dave Cutler, who came from DEC back in like the 80s or whatever, and he built Windows NT, he built Azure, the OS, he built the hypervisor for Xbox. He is the only senior technical fellow.
Wow.
That isn't even a real title. That's just his title.
Wow.
So it's kind of like I think at those levels, everyone's a unicorn and everyone has their own path. So you aren't trying to follow people's path one to one. You're looking for proxies for impact. To be a fellow, you need industry-wide impact, not just impact in your division, in your company. It's like you need to do something that impacts the industry. I think we hired someone recently who is a fellow who like invented RSS. It's like that level of like thing, right? It's like you built something that became the industry standard for the internet. Like there was a guy on my team who was the intern for Tim Berners-Lee, and he is on the HTTP spec. Like, is that Henrik? Yeah. So those are the kind of people that end up being fellows, I think.
Were there any unexpected perks of getting promoted to distinguished engineer?
besides more money, let me think.
Well, for instance, I guess the thing that I'm curious about is, at a lot of companies, when you get promoted to a certain level, you get added to special forums that only distinguished engineers have
Okay, the
access. Yeah.
coolest part. Here's the coolest part. There's an email alias called engineer. That is all the DEs on Microsoft.
Oh,
It is just the
wow.
coolest alias of the engineer on Microsoft. Like, oh, this is really cool.
That's
So
awesome.
that's one of the perks. Yeah, but there's an internal there's a forum where we all meet. I think every couple of months. The way this typically works is you have a sponsor, right? So when I was going to be, I told my mentor I want to be a DE. You know, I had mentors who were fellows. Okay, so one tip, when I became a partner, I told I told my management that I want a mentor. I want help finding a mentor who is a fellow because I want to be one. So I figured if I want to be one, I should have people who are mentors that can help me get there. Um, and one of my mentors was who was very impactful in my career. He invented PowerShell, Jeffrey Snover, and he was one of the best mentors that I've had. He actually left Microsoft and I went to Google recently, but he was like really impactful for me in my career. He was one of my main sponsors, and I ended up getting to go to one of these tech leaders forums. And I got to mingle and talk to all the people who were like there, and it was really interesting, really cool.
You mentioned that that mentor was incredibly impactful. What was the things that he was telling you that made a difference?
A lot of people, I want to say, sugarcoat like how to get places, how to get promoted, and they'll give you very generic feedback. You have to do a project that's super impactful. He was very much direct. Like, we should go talk to the people who decide and ask them like where you are, and it was jarring to me because I never thought about asking the teacher for why why it like no one ever tells you you have to do X to get promoted. Exactly. And it never exactly works one to one. It's like you have to have more impact. So make sure you're working on something that's like, super impactful and maybe you aren't now and change. He was like, let's go to the source, go to the host, let's go talk to the CTO, let's go figure out like what it means for you in your role. And I was like, that is super helpful. And because it helped me understand what I should and shouldn't be doing in a very like real way. It wasn't just arbitrary advice that just happens to you. It was like very explicit. I had a second mentor. I had done some, there's this thing where you can get feedback from different people in the company, your manager, your peer, etc. And it gets turned into a package and they give you feedback and it tells you your strengths and what you're good at, what you're really bad at, what how you act under stress, all these things. And my my first reaction is, "Oh my gosh, I am gonna have to fix all the things that I'm bad at. I gotta figure out how to, get leveled." And my mentor was like, "No, no. Take your strengths and amplify them even more. You could work on the things you're not good at and be average at those, or you can work on things that you're really good at and be superhuman at those things." And it broke my brain because up until and that was like I want to say 5 years ago. Up until then, I had been thinking about, man, how do I make sure I am better at everything so I can like be a well-rounded individual? And he was like, no one gets promoted to these roles for being average. You have to be superhuman in something that like you're really good at that people aren't, right? So that helped me refocus to thinking about finding ways to make up for things that I'm not good at. So as an example, if I form a team, I am not the one that's going to schedule meetings, or I am not going to go through every detail of how we ship and all the checklists. I am super bad at that stuff. And I will make sure I have someone who is really good at that stuff so I can focus on what I'm good at. Right. So that actually helped me reframe how to think about amplifying what I do well to kind of get more impact.
Makes sense. I mean, it's kind of like a power law type of thing. At the
Yes,
top is where there's the most insane returns. Just take those things and go further on that exponential
exactly.
curve.
It's exactly that. Yep.
You mentioned a lot of these. impressive engineers. And I think as a distinguished engineer, you have a unique perspective because you can see what is impressive with a critical eye of a great engineer. What are some examples of other engineers that you look up to and what makes them impressive to you?
I can talk about some of the well-known ones and then talk about like just people that I work with in general that are impressive for different reasons. My current team, they're like 5 other partner level engineers that have been here 20 plus years that are just really, really good for different reasons. Like experts in the GC, one person is like a super coder, like just he just codes 10x. So people complain about engineers aren't 10x. He's 10x. He just produces way more code than everyone else combined, right? There's one guy who like literally seemed to know everything about obscure things you would never understand, and you're like without having to have seen it yourself. There's all kind of stuff, stuff about C, stuff about compiler, stuff about the OS, and you're like, how does he seem to know everything about everything, right? And then there are engineers who just seem to know what to build and have a good eye judgment. So I'm on the C sharp review design review team. So we meet every couple of months and we review C sharp features, right? New features coming to the language. And I'm on there with Anders Helsberg, who made C sharp, right? So like what I say doesn't matter. What he says matters. I mean, it does. It counts. But the way he communicates, like the way he gives feedback for what feels good and what does not feel good, he always does it in a way that is very much like he is not talking down to you.
Mm.
I mean, this dude invented 4 languages that are just like what everyone uses, and yet he can still talk about it in a way where it's like, some people are really smart and they talk down to you, and you feel dumb because he's like, oh, he's super smart and I'm dumb. He does it in a very pragmatic, practical way. But then you see the code he commits, and you're like, this dude is inventing type system theory that we haven't even seen before. TypeScript is like insane. So I admire a lot of like watching people like that spread their impact. Mark Russinovich, who's CTO of Azure, famous for his Windows tools. He still codes, and it blows me away sometimes. Like he actually is working on something right now, and he sent an email 2 days ago, and I was like, "Holy crap!" And it was very a dev centric email. It wasn't a high level. We should do X. It's like, no, I wrote some code, I improved the performance, and like here's the results. And I was just like, how does he have time to do stuff? So I think whenever I see high level engineers or ICs still coding like that, I get really inspired. It's really easy to fall into the meeting trap. Actually, when I went partner, I fell super steeply into the meeting trap of like, I was in meetings all day, every day, and I got really sad. And my mentor said, as an IC, your job is to have like, you need time to think and to build stuff. So minimally on your calendar, block 8 hours a week minimum to do that stuff. And it took me a while to change my brain to say, I can just say no to meetings. Decline, 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 decline. Now I can write code.
So I think the next set of questions I want to ask you, because you have a public presence on Twitter, there's all these top tweets that you have that I think are really interesting short thoughts that I'd be curious to have you expand on. And
Yeah.
so I think the first one is talking about university courses. And you said that there should be a university course that explains how to refactor code, how to make changes to it without breaking an existing code base. My question to you is, if you were to design that course, what would some of the key concepts be?
Having been working for this long now in industry, computer science is not software engineering. It's not even close, right? Computer science is like learning the science of computers and bits and bytes and the math and algorithms, and you do a little bit of things that are software engineering like, but it's nothing like software engineering. So when you get your first job, you spend a lot of time just trying to understand what's there, so you can surgically make your first change and not destroy everything, right? Like don't break the build, don't break everything else. So I think if I were to have a course, you would be thrown into an artificially big code base. We would have a maybe it would have to change every year because students will like just copy from the previous year. So it would change every year, different code base, and your job is to make a bug fix. You got to fix a bug in this code base and write a test for it. And just the skills you learn being a code architect, a code archaeologist, is so different from just writing banging out a leak code question or doing a homework assignment that is just like this one thing in a textbook. You learn a lot of adjacent skills from just trying to figure out where to put the code in the first place. I think it's funny. I think it would be super useful. Like every assignment is making one fix, and maybe you can set up the code base such that it's not super hard to figure out what it is. Anyone with enough time, like we could figure out and make this one trivial change and add one text. But I think a lot of people's jobs are tweaking software that's there already. Not everyone gets to create new software. Like if you work on Windows, sure you'll build new components, but you aren't gonna change the kernel unless you're gonna do a new OS. So yeah, super useful skill.
Yeah, I think there was another set of tweets that I saw that was kind of around this idea of that tech interviews are focused so much on writing new code, but actually the real high
Mm.
leverage skill is debugging it. Yeah, what gives you that thought? Maybe you can expand on that.
So early in my career, I worked with a ton of engineers who were, and on the .NET team, we had a lot of engineers who just worked at the platform level. So I got to see firsthand people diagnose crazy crashes, risk conditions, threading issues. I got a firsthand seat to even watching people's mindset when they go to diagnose issues. And I thought to myself, like, there's kind of two skill sets that are maybe you learn some coding, but they're just not the same skill set. And if you think about building an application, deploying it, shipping it, and then getting crash reports, trying to resolve issues, like trying to figure out what's going on in production, there's this second skill set that is just not writing, like not authoring code. That is, how do you even think through debugging issues? How do you know which thread caused the exception? What tools do you use? How do you think about how it got there? Is like, and I thought to myself, it would be fun to have an interview where you give someone a crash dump or something like, hey, this app just crashed, like figure out what the problem is. And you aren't trying to see if they can solve it. You want to see what they even start doing. Like, do you start adding logs? Do you rerun the program? How do you think about risk conditions? Do you like print thread IDs and try to figure out interleaving? Like all these interesting things come out of watching someone try to diagnose problems. It's funny, I have the highest respect for engineers who can be thrown into like a problem situation where they don't know the code base super well, and they can kind of solve the issue. Super fun story. I remember this is early days in Azure. There was this very, I can't remember what the site was, but there was a very popular site that was going down and was running on Azure. And I'm in like, also, I was up late. It was 1 a.m. And my CVP sends me a message, like a DM. It's like, hey, you free? I'm just like, what? Yeah, I'm free. I get added to a call that has like 100 engineers trying to debug why the site is crashing. And we called the team who was working on it. It was some other company, but we were helping them as engineers from Microsoft trying to debug the issue. And you could just see the different people's skill sets trying to figure out what the issue was, and we solved it eventually. It was a concurrency issue somewhere in some dictionary that caused a risk condition. And I thought to myself, like, this is one of the skills that you need to have as an engineer. Like, writing code is just it's a small piece of your overall skill set. Learning how to debug and think through issues is like another big chunk.
Yeah, and as evidence of that being very impactful, I know some companies, every company has their different archetypes, and you mentioned like super coder, also known as code machine in some
Code
places.
machine, yep.
There's also, I've heard, the archetype fixer too, and that's a
Yeah.
really cool one because it's been described as someone drops in somewhere, they make a one-line change after tons of investigation, and it gets 2 times better, 3 times better, or something like that.
Oh my gosh, we have some engineer on the team who there'll be a thread that gets started off. Oh, perp issue somewhere in gRPC call, and I'll add the engineer to the thread and say, hey, can you look at this? Boom, boom, boom. Here's a trace. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's solved. It's solved.
So
Yeah.
impressive. Um, Another tweet that you had I thought was really interesting is it says, lukewarm take. The lower on the technology stack you sit, the less mistakes you're allowed to make. What
Ooh.
what made you think of that? Did something break super low level in the stack somewhere?
I have to be working on something. So I work on platforms. So the way we think about software is way different from, higher level services or even web front ends or whatever. I think maybe I have been working on something that broke. I mean, a lot of things break that are just kind of insane. The things that we change that break services are absolutely unheard of. Um, we will change the order of how things come back in a method, and like it just snaps. Some company's website goes down. So I think when you work at that layer, that you gain an appreciation for the kind of changes you can and can't make. Um, I think I think that tweet maybe was inspired by one of these bugs because I work on. I think at that time I had been working on first party adoption of .NET, and we had seen a couple of people upgrade and hit issues that made us just completely shocked. It was like, how did you find that bug? Like, no one hits that. What do you mean you have 400 arguments to a method? Like, that's not. There's some limits somewhere that like that can't be a real problem, right?
There's another tweet here, and I thought it was really interesting. It's about promotions. You said that when you got promoted to a senior software engineer at Microsoft, you remember thinking that other people were smarter than you and should have been promoted first, and you would have thought they would be angry, but the opposite happened. That actually having good
That's a
coworkers
good
matters
tweet.
a lot, and people weren't, you know. So yeah,
Yeah.
what's your thought there?
This is you are bringing back some good memories. So like, I remember when I was going to senior, I was actually a little worried about getting promoted before other people because I had been on a really fast path, and I thought, I mean, maybe it would make people jealous. It was like, why not me? And when I joined my team, I think there were 4 people from MIT and 2 from CMU, and I had gone to Florida Tech, and I was like, okay, these people are like way smarter than me. So like my way of working through imposter syndrome was just to like work really hard and like be a busy bee doing stuff. Um, I think I understood that when I got promoted to senior, that the impact was not about being intelligent. It was not just about like getting the highest grade or being smart. It was like, are the things that you're working on being impactful to the business? And that was the shift where I began to understand like, okay, it's not just about what I know. It's not just about that this person on the team is really smart in area X. It's like, can I take all that and produce something that is impactful? And that promotion helped me see, okay, that was the NuGet thing, the Siglar thing. That's how you get promoted. That's how you add impact to the team. It's not just about knowing this thing about this feature, about this area, about this OS. Because I always felt like, man, I don't know enough about technology X or about area X. Like I got to go deeper and learn more. And the question was always, is that for you or is that for your career? Like, what's it for? Um, you don't have to know how, I don't know, maybe you should, but you don't have to know how TCP/IP works to get promoted to senior. I'm sure people don't know the details of how it works, right? Um, I think that promotion for me helped me separate like being smart from making an impact. It's like, okay, promotions impact these promotions. Being smart is something else. It's just like knowing more stuff and being helpful for solving problems. Um, and the second part was my coworkers were happy for me, at least outwardly. It was But I was really worried at the time because it was like new person joins team, gets promoted really fast. Like, do people see that as why not me, or do they see it as yeah, that makes sense, right? When I ask questions about other people who kind of went up really fast to my peers at the time, they would say things like everyone knew it was going to happen. Like there's certain people where people kind of know where it happens, and you never know if that's the case for you or not, or if people are just like, man, I don't think that person deserves it.
So you've been working at Microsoft for over 17 years now, and one of this tweets that you have is talking about big company tips that you have, and it says, "Before you change roles, ask when the last reorg was." What's the thinking behind that advice?
Big companies are a machine, and I remember someone telling me really early on that like, and maybe it was tongue in cheek. It was like when you are an executive vice president at these companies or a CVP or whatever you are, you show that you're doing something like it's like motion, like reorgs or motion, and motion means that you're changing stuff. And the only thing constant is change in these big companies. Like there's always a reorg plan. There's always a reorg coming. There's always a reorg that just happened. And you're trying to figure out in between the reorg moments, what were like who were the leaders, what was the impetus, what caused it to happen. I mean, you can never know when that's what's coming, but learning about the previous one is super, I think it's super important just to understand like where we are, where you would be heading, right? In that dimension. My org had a big reorg like recently. Previous meta person now runs Jay now runs my org. And I think it's super important to know that because it helps you figure out what the purpose is now, right? If it just happened, it tells you a lot about where the org is heading, where the team is heading, where things are going. I think it's easy to kind of change teams or move around and not think about the overall place where that org is going. Within Microsoft is big enough that is like every new org is a whole new company. So it's definitely worthwhile trying to figure out where what the goals are of that org, where it stands now, what happened last time, kind of thing. And I bet I tweeted that after either talking to a mentee who had been reorg, and I think they had been like 4 in a row or something like that, something crazy, or it happened to me. But yeah,
I see. So you're saying you should read the behind the scenes of the reorg and what that means for your career in the
oh
future.
yeah,
Hmm.
oh yeah. I heard someone say something to me recently that was really good advice. It was when you're looking to change jobs, don't think about the things you love because they'll be easy to do. Think about the things you hate. Like what can you not stand about like working in the area or an environment or whatever it is, and go look for that. If you see that, that'll be the thing that will be hard to get around or work through. Let's say you hated open space and you wanted a closed office. If the company was open, like don't go to the company that is open space because like then you'll be unhappy, right? There are better examples that are probably more toxic about like people, but that's a simpler way of describing it.
You've been at Microsoft for a long time, your entire career, even
17
including your
years.
internships. I'm curious what has kept you at Microsoft as long as you've been.
Yeah, every time, yeah, I think about this myself a lot. Like, what keeps me here? And I think I am part of the generation of millennials who broke the curse of like our boomer parents like trying to stay in the same place forever. I have a lot of friends that jumped around and they got paid for it, and it was really good for them in their careers. I want to say I maybe didn't take the same path, and it kind of worked out. I had a couple of times where probably the most impactful time where I maybe almost left was when I was senior. My boss left and went to Twitter, pre-IPO Twitter. And a year in, she pings me and tells me to come like go interview at Twitter. And I actually interviewed at Twitter and at GitHub. It's funny, GitHub and Twitter at the same time. And I got both offers, and the offers were pretty good. And it was probably the first time in my career where I was like at a crossroads because my career had been going fine. I was working on Signal. I was like on the up and up, But then here's this offer that like seems a lot better, and they're pre-IPO companies. Like, should I go? And there was a lot of deliberation as to like if I should go or should stay or not or whatever. Um, I ended up staying, and it worked out. But I will say the morning like Twitter went public,
Mhm.
instant depression. I was depressed for like a week. It's like, oh my god, oh my gosh.
What kept you at Mark? Because it sounds like those offers were better than what you were making at the time.
Yes, they were. They were. So when I got they countered, and the counter was fine. It wasn't like I mean, I guess looking back now it was pretty good, but it was fine. Um, but they had me talk to like our executive vice president, and he was like, "You're gonna be like a distinct engineer in like 5 years." I mean, he definitely oversold. But I think maybe for me, it wasn't just the money that made me stay. It was like I had been working on something that I had built that was impactful, that was like built permissionless. I think at the time I had been getting a lot of autonomy at Microsoft, and leaving would have been like starting over. Probably one of the things that people don't talk about when changing roles or leaving or getting a better offer somewhere else is you build up a network of people, a network of you know a track record. I can kind of work on what I want to work on at the moment. At that time, maybe not so much, but I think I had been given more autonomy. And when you're weighing the like should I stay or should I go, is like money is one thing. The other is like are the people like are the people good? Not just good engineers, but like good people that you want to work with. So there's the people aspect, the money aspect, the network aspect. All these things kind of matter in the soup. And I think I stayed because at Microsoft, I had been getting my fix of working on a new thing every couple of years. Every if on my LinkedIn, there's like a new project every 2 years, and that's like by design. I think it helped me not get bored or not like kind of like be um I didn't feel the need to go somewhere else to do what I want to do because I felt like I could do it at Microsoft. So that kept me here for this long. I mean, I won't say that I hadn't thought about leaving every now and then. It does come into my brain every now and then, but I think so far the people, the pay for me is fine. The people, the pay, the project, the impact I get to have working on what I work on is a big thing for me as well.
Do you think that if you had a mentee today facing the same decision, so they're at Microsoft and they're doing well, and then they have pre-IPO OpenAI offer or something better than what they have now, well, would you tell them you should stay at Microsoft, or would you say, maybe go with the risky thing?
I would tell them to go. So, fun story. I actually had a mentee who got an offer from a different company, but they weren't in a place where they could do their best work. So the combination of the offer plus that, I was like, you have to go. I said they're gonna counter, but you have to go. You can't stay here. You should go. You should go. If I had that for myself, maybe I would have been gone. I would have been gone by then.
You had this interesting tweet on job hopping that I thought was maybe relevant now, which is that you said once in your career, you should work on a project long enough to see the long-term impact of your decisions. It's a humbling
That's a good one.
experience.
That's a good one.
So it could be better for long-term growth in some cases.
Yeah. So what I would say, so that tweet was inspired by my career has always been this like work on a thing and move on. I would still have ties to the thing I worked on, help people that are working on it now whenever things go wrong or whatever. But the thing that I have worked on for 10 years, .NET Core, was the longest I've ever worked on anything in my career. Ever. Ever. And I think it was a good change because it really helped me appreciate like deciding to do something in the first 2 years, and then holy crap, seeing the impact of that decision, whether it be bad or good, right? Um, it gives you a whole new skill set, perspective on how to make decisions. And for some things, it's obvious, and you can say, okay, well, we didn't understand at the time the scope or the scenario or whatever else, but things that didn't seem important became important. One of the jokes that I make about, when you work on something for 10 years, all the small issues you thought were small that were just like, we can do it later, will become big issues at some point. Like somebody will hit everything that you punted. And it happened. It all of it happened. And I thought, like, I think maybe if you think about 10-year projects, 20-year projects, who knows if it's good for career growth? Maybe not. Like maybe if you work on the same for 20 years, like, oh my gosh, not great. But it'll teach you a different skill set. That is like, you get to understand the implications. You get to understand, if you were going to build the next version, you would have much more insight into like what you messed up. It's really hard to appreciate what you messed up when you like do a thing and you leave. You ship V1, all good, new project. But I don't fault anyone for like doing both things, because I've done both too.
Yeah, I could see it better for, I guess, developing judgment, but I could also see it being, imagine a career that's a leg of jumps. That could, and if assuming every jump is higher than the other, that person's probably gonna have a lot of career growth. But if all the projects they start just kind of go downhill once they leave, I wonder what it does for their pattern recognition and judgment.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's funny. I told someone I don't know exactly how to describe the ingredients that make up a successful project, but I can tell you when I'm working on one versus when I'm not. And that is built up over time and experience, and like seeing which things work out, which things don't work out. It's kind of fine tuning, I guess, an internal model in my head. Like, okay, this has the smell of something that can be successful versus not. And there are some things here that I'm seeing that work out well, and some things that are not working out super well. And yeah.
Coming to the end of this, I kind of want to ask you some just high level reflections and things. One thing I'm curious, because you're so high up at Microsoft at this point, and you've been there for so long too. I know the common perception is pre-Satya, Microsoft was very different from post-Satya, Microsoft, at least in terms of stock performance. Did you notice anything internally, like the culture shifting when Satya became CEO?
Huge. I mean, I I always tell new hires that it's really hard to think about the culture shift between Satya and Ballmer, because I lived it, right? I was in it. And it's really hard to see the big jumps from where we are now to where we used to be. Because it literally happened gradually. It was like things were rolled out and there's a lot more the culture just changed completely, right? Probably one of the biggest ones that I noticed, because I experienced this when I joined there, was teams competing on the same end goal, like two different teams. That I think historically there's been a Microsoft used to do this thing where two end teams could work on the same end state, and then one would win, and the others would like, who knows what would happen, disband and reorg something else. Um, there was a big focus on collaboration over like just like being the first to do something. I never experienced it myself on my team, but I definitely worked with teams who you could tell were kind of building the solution before knowing what the problem was. There's a lot of that that I saw when I was, and I was an observer. I was like very early in career, like observing how people interacted and culture wise, and just the way people interacted changed, like meeting culture, like how meetings would appear, like emails, things that seem so obvious in hindsight. Like if I look at how people would communicate in meetings now versus emails versus how I used to work, like remote friendliness versus like how people work in teams. Like I remember being in a meeting and someone raising their hand on Teams, and I was like, "Raise your hand for talk? Like, what? Like, this is not Microsoft." because I had grown up in a culture where you would just talk, right? You just talk. Like you don't you wait for a pause and you talk. You don't raise your hand to talk, or you don't like. Maybe it sounds crazy. There's a lot more consideration for everyone else. It wasn't just what's it called? Highest paid person's opinion.
Mhm.
I think that's kind of how Microsoft felt when I joined. Like if you were in a meeting with people that are very senior, um, hard to get a word in sometimes. And if the most senior person was loud and like aggressive, like people that didn't think that way in the moment would not get a say.
Wow.
I think one of the big changes was in like how we communicated as a company, as a team. Collaboration became a thing that was part of your review. So like if you were not trying to use things that other teams built, like you were dinged for it. If you were gonna copy and create a clone of someone else's thing because you're special, no, the incentives push you in the opposite direction. And I think that's probably the most impactful change. That and the style of comms was like a big change that I observed just like existing in those times.
I see. Okay, so the culture shifted through performance incentives and maybe just some of the stuff that was messaged top down.
Yeah. Yeah. And the behaviors that were being modeled by like the leaders. Like literally
Mhm.
in meetings, people raising their hands, people calling people who haven't spoken. Like imagine you're in a meeting and there's someone really quiet that has really good thoughts, but maybe they don't like to speak up in meetings, pulling out that person in the meeting. Like I remember when that first happened, I had never seen it before. I had never seen someone say, um, "Hey Ryan, you're quiet. You've been quiet the whole time. What's your opinion on this matter?" Like that, there was just people talking, and then you would leave. Now there's a lot more. It's much better, much more consideration for others. A lot less people screamy, shouty. I was in a meeting like really early in my career. People were like shouting. I remember thinking to myself, like, "This is normal." Am I gonna have to shout at some point?
There's a famous XKCD comic about the culture at different companies, and if
Oh,
I
the
recall correctly, the Microsoft one is a drawing of people with guns
the guns.
pointed at each other.
The guns, yeah. It's so funny. I think that picture is funny, and it's definitely not guns at all. It went from guns to ambivalence, like "don't bother me," to collaboration. So I think that progression is probably the biggest change in between Bomber and Satya. The joke about the guns to I don't have a gun at you, but as long as you aren't gonna like disturb my situation, like we're good to go. Like, you're over there, I'm over here, it's all good. To collaboration, where like we incentivize collaboration. You get rewarded for collaboration though. So I think that was the biggest shift and change I saw in the culture.
When you look back on your career so far, do you have any major regrets that people can learn from?
It's a good question. Major regrets. Major, maybe not. I would say early in my career, I would say super arrogant. I was very arrogant. You could probably find my GitHub if you look at some of the GitHub comments and the tone. I would say I was lacking some empathy in a bunch of different places. One of the big shifts that I think my brain made over time, learning how to build teams and kind of impact with others, was like patience, empathy. Those two traits help a lot with like growing teams and growing like influence and people, right? It's not just because you're right. Being right means nothing. It's just not important, right? Being right is like one of many things. Um, and I used to like I'm right, therefore everything else is like will follow on from there. And I think learning over time that doesn't really matter as much because there's a lot of shades of gray when you're in software engineering. This is not the most important thing. So I think early in my career, I was very much like, yeah, I'm right. Like I don't really understand why we're why we're having this conversation. Why are we still talking about this thing? I'm right. And every now and then it'll creep out, but like I think I have a lot more self awareness now. Whenever that's not the most important thing for the moment, even though it's like a thing still. I learned over time how to dial it. But in general, yeah, maybe the fact that I didn't leave and go to Twitter because I would have gotten like a ton of money as a senior engineer. Um, or go to Facebook. I had a bunch of opportunities. I just didn't take it super early on. Okay, one regret that I do have that is not directly career related, but like maybe in the same ballpark. I had a friend in 2008 who sent me a message. He was gonna do a Bitcoin company. And I was
Mm.
like, I don't know about this crypto thing. Dude has so much Bitcoin though. What? Oh my god.
That's so
Yeah,
funny.
that one.
When you look back on your career, what was your work-life balance like throughout?
I used to answer this by saying, there was no balance. There was just like work hard, play hard kind of thing. I would say now, someone told me recently that work-life balance isn't about 9 to 5 and stopping. It's about what things give you energy and what things drain energy from you. So early on in my career, I was working all hours. I still do because I enjoyed what I was doing. And maybe a little too much, so I would just like have to dial back every now and then. But I enjoyed what I was doing. So I worked a lot, like at work, after work, like on different things. Because programming for me was not just my job; it was like my passion. So I I never forget one summer I came back from vacation. And I started making games, just like for fun. And I learned a lot about making games. I took that into things at work that I was doing and more stuff. And for me, it was always I just love building stuff. So I want to build more stuff. Um, what I would say is draining now is like meetings that just don't feel as though they have a purpose. So if I were in meetings all day and I felt drained after work and I kept doing more work, that to me would feel like no balance because I want to do stuff that isn't meetings, but I'm not doing that during the day, and then I'm going home after hours doing more work. That is like burnout quality. So I would say like work life balance was always I work a lot. I'm absolutely a workaholic. For me, I love this career. It's kind of insane that I get to code for a living. So I see that as like a privilege that I'm gonna keep doing until I can't do it anymore.
Yeah,
Um,
I think when I look at a lot of people's careers who have been, as successful as you, that's one of the unfair advantages I see almost everyone has is they have this innate intrinsic motivation, so they work a ton of hours just nonstop, and a lot of like you, a lot of people love it, and that is such an unfair advantage.
it is. I saw one of Andrew Karpathy's talks, and he said 10,000 hours to get good at anything. And maybe it's not true, but I early in my career, and maybe even now, I wanted to become a very good software engineer, right? And people always ask me, like, "Hey, what book did you read? What did you do to become a good software engineer?" And I'm like, I wrote and read a lot of code, like just anything you can get your hands on. And there's so much more code now out there you can read, consume, and write. And I'm not sure if it's good advice, but what I know is that I did not get good at software engineering or building a programming, whatever you want to call it, from like seeing something online or reading a blog post, or it's like just do it, like build everything, databases, distributed systems, games, like everything you build will teach you a new skill that you don't even know you have until later on. My GitHub is a graveyard of projects. I just build stuff and put it on there, and it's like I want to learn how to do multi. I don't forget. I tried to build a fighting game when I was 16. I wanted to build Street Fighter, so I got all the art from somewhere online. I started to build a Street Fighter clone, and it wasn't for any real purpose. It was just to learn how to build a fighting game. Right? Like, how do you make key combos work, and how do you make that stuff work? And that pattern of like, I need to know how this thing works has served me like to this day. Right? Like, I need to understand how the thing I'm doing works. How do I get this thing to be on that thing? Yeah. So I love what I do, and I think that has helped me um, do it more and get better at it.
And then last question, if you could go back to yourself when you were just graduating college and entering the industry and give yourself some advice, what would you say?
Oh my god, negotiate your freaking salary. When I got my job, I did not know that I could even negotiate. I would have gotten more offers. I mean, looking back, it doesn't matter right now, but if I was gonna talk to a new college hire getting a job, like, get multiple offers
Mm.
and, like, bump up that money. Bump it up, bump it up. I watched my friends do it, and I was just, like, in shock. Like, I'm from Barbados, I go to the States, I get an internship, I get a job. They give me the most money I've ever seen in my life, and I'm like, "Thank you. Thank you." Um, thank you for the money, I have my job. To hear kids talk about, "Yeah, I said no," or, "I said I'm gonna go check out Google first or Facebook and get offers." Now it's just like, "What?" And that just became normal. Like, that became, like, the norm, and it blew my mind. Like, I couldn't rationalize what was happening. I do think it's definitely worthwhile doing that. I've seen kids do it so well. I'm like, "This is so impressive." This is just like, this kid is telling us no. And I've been, like, on enough hiring committees now to hire interns, and I'm watching the back and forth between this kid and the recruiter, and I'm just like, "This kid's a genius." Just bumping up his offer, like, it's amazing. Mass respect.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, David. Really appreciate it. Is there anything that you want to say now, or maybe where can people find you?
I am available on X, Discord, Blue Sky. Are those the main socials now? Are there more?
I mean, there's
Blue
LinkedIn, but I don't
Sky,
know if
X.
you use it.
LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, yeah, you're right. LinkedIn.
Yeah.
It's funny. LinkedIn has become a social network. It's the most bizarre thing ever. I am on all these things, tweeting about .NET and AI and all kinds of programming stuff.
Awesome. I'll put it in the links in the show notes. Thanks so much, dude.
Yeah, awesome.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. I don't sell anything or do sponsorships, but if you want to help out with the podcast, you can support by engaging with the content on YouTube or on Spotify. If you want to drop a review, that'll be super helpful. And if there's any guests that you want to bring on to, please let me know. I feel like sourcing very senior ICs, there's no well studied list out there on Google that I can just search this up. So if there's someone in your org or at your company who you really look up to and you want to hear their career story, let me know and I'll reach out to them.